anything disrespectful about punk rock. People are going to hear you.
I also started listening to Jeff Tweedy's new book.
Well, the guy from from
Wilco and
Uncle Tupelo.
Uncle Tupelo.
But it has some music.
Uncle Tupelo was the most important part, but Wilco's good.
Yeah, I'm surprised. I think it's interesting that he is the more successful of the two. When, in my opinion, it was very clear that Jay was the genius, right? But you know.
But sometimes the genius is more tortured and less functional.
Yes, that is true. That is true. Hey guys, welcome. This is Common Ground. You'll notice I don't have music anymore because I haven't found something that I consider good enough to replace the Clash. And I got in trouble for playing the Clash, which I was hoping I was going to get sued by the Clash. That was one of the goals for me. That didn't happen. But anyway, we're about to kick off the show tonight, so welcome. We'll kick it off in just a few seconds. For those of you that want to start thinking, first of all, let me tell you, it looks like I got some new people joining us tonight. This show is a forum for discussion of the most difficult topics. Our goal is never to win the debate or be right or make you wrong. Hey, Joe. Hey, John. Buonanotte, signore. Che bella. Grazie, signore. Grazie. Amico mio. So it's never our goal to win or be right or make you wrong. What we're doing here is modeling civil discussion, something that is a lost art in the modern world. I'm sure you'll agree. So we're going to get into this in just a moment. Thank you all for joining us. I'm John Lombardo. I'm your host. And I think I'm going to go ahead and kick us off because we got a lot of people here. We have a very important topic to discuss tonight. We need all the time we can get on this one. So I'm going to kick it off. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here. You are on Common Ground, the place where we bring fear to watch it die. Fear is the great divider. Fear is the tool with which powerful interests in our media, our government, and the private sector have polarized Americans into warring tribes. We crouch, huddled in imaginary trenches, embroiled in a manufactured cultural battle for the soul of America. In this imaginary war, there are two sides, one on the left, one on the right, and both sides are hurtling in the same direction, down. On this show, we attempt to strike a blow at that fear. And we want to, by discussing the topics that concern us all, and are the hardest ones to discuss, frankly, but by doing it with respect, civility, and a mind open to a differing opinion. And I'm happy to tell you that in the few months we've been doing this, we have found over and over again that when we can discuss our differing opinions free from anger, we can form an alliance of reason with our fellow citizens, even when we don't agree. And we discover that we are not all that different, and it is not so hard to reach common ground. So I'm your host, John Lombardo, and tonight's topic is a doozy. Does religion help or hinder the creation of a healthy society? Is it good for us or bad for us socially? The reason that we're doing this show tonight, guys, is because this week Attorney General William Barr, speaking to an audience of students and alumni at the University of Notre Dame, suggested that many of our social ills like addiction and violence can be blamed on the rise of secularism in the United States of America. I thought it was very interesting to hear an elected official and the top law enforcement official of the country talk about these problems in the light of being caused by a lack of religiosity in the United States of America. So I'm wondering what your opinions are. Is that true? What are your stories? Has religion helped or hurt you in your life? Are you neutral? Let's talk about it. And for this discussion, I'm going to bring in my co-host. I call him the smartest guy who still hangs around me, but he's uniquely designed for tonight's discussion. So Eric, get on in here, my friend. Welcome, Eric Rodriguez. I'm sure that if you could, you would be applauding loudly for Eric. And I'm going to scoot on over and get you in here. So, Eric, we got some new people on tonight, so it's good to see you guys.
Hi, everyone.
Eric, you tell everybody really quickly as we get into this topic, tell everybody what is your background in religion?
Can I first tell you that I thought that we were doing a different topic tonight?
Oh, did you really?
Yeah. It's fine. It's fine. Thought we were going to talk about PC culture tonight, but it's fine.
No. That's another show.
I have a bachelor's degree in religious studies from UC Berkeley. It's been a long time since I was studying there. It was in the early 90s, but religion and philosophy, spirituality have been a huge part of what I've been interested in since I was a teenager.
And myself included. In fact, funny story, I actually helped you write one of your honors thesis papers. I think it was honors thesis papers on the difference between Theravada and Mahayana Buddhism. I'm also a big fan of spirituality. I don't have any degrees or anything, but the reason I wanted to talk about this topic tonight is this interesting story that's in the news. I'm going to actually read to you exactly what Attorney General William Barr said to this group at Notre Dame. He said that cultural trends and immoral upheaval and decades of effort to undermine religion had given way to growing illegitimacy rates, drug use, and angry, alienated young males, a population associated recently with a spate of domestic attacks. There's an actual quote from Attorney General Barr. He said, the campaign to destroy the traditional moral order has coincided, and I believe has brought with it immense suffering and misery. And yet the forces of secularism, ignoring these tragic results, press on with even greater militancy. So he also said that among the militant secularists are many so-called progressives. But where is the progress, Barr asked. Those who defy the creed risk a figurative burning at the stake. Social, educational, and professional ostracism and exclusion waged through lawsuits and savage social media campaigns. So there's a couple of things that he's saying here. He is suggesting that our society is negatively impacted by a turning away from religion, and that to not participate in that results in individuals being attacked and demonized for it. So I thought that was just such. Greetings from the executive team of Christian.com. I'm glad you guys are here. I want you to be here and participate in this discussion. If you're just joining us, everybody, you're on Common Ground. I'm John. This is Eric. And tonight's question is, does religion help or harm society? Does it make societies healthier, or does it cause more problems? What are your thoughts about that idea? I mean, look, what are your thoughts about what the Attorney General has said here?
There's so much.
Yeah.
First of all, what religion are we talking about? I mean, he says religion.
So he is speaking at the University of Notre Dame. So I'm assuming he's referring at least to Christianity, probably Catholicism, because it's a Catholic school, but I don't know that for sure.
Right.
But I think he's definitely referring to Christianity.
But he's saying religion, and my guess is that he's got a very specific idea of what that is, but it's not revealed here. It's I don't know, to blame secularism on, or to blame the societal ills on secularism, to me seems like a huge leap. And there's also nothing in the statement that really ties very specific, complaints. It's like our we're going to hell in a handbasket is basically what he's saying. And I don't know that. Well, I want to read something here.
Go right ahead, because what I came up with as I read this was, and I shared this video with you guys, I actually agree with some of the things that he's saying completely. I think that we think there's a different pathway out of the challenge. Mr. Barr and I do, but I agree with what he's saying. So I've got some data to share with you. There's good news and bad news about this. So John Preto has commented, according to Pew Research, Christianity will remain the largest religious sect through 2050. That's true, John. And also, legitimate research has linked religion to long life. So first of all, let me read you guys a couple. 77% of Americans say that religion is at least somewhat important in their lives, okay? And 83% say they're fairly certain that God or a higher power exists. So, and then we'll talk a little bit about the distinction between spirituality and religion that's become much more prevalent and common.
Let me say a couple of things
Yeah,
that I was. You had said something in the opening about this, and
Before you do that, let me just throw in there, guys. This is Common Ground. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. The question tonight is: religion healthy or harmful for society? Please chime in with your opinions, and we want to hear your points of view.
There's this interesting point about being ostracized or burned at the stake. He actually says, if you espouse religious beliefs. And yet, every single politician, if they don't talk about God in a positive way, I mean, I see them being ostracized. You have to at least pretend to be a Christian in this country to get any kind of political power.
That's true.
And now I'm not saying that this doesn't exist, but I wonder, to me, it seems like when people are pushing forward exclusionary kind of language that's based on their religion, I think that's when they get ostracized. It's not by saying I'm religious, I'm a Christian, and then all of a sudden that by itself means that you're not invited to the club anymore. I think it's when there's when things come up around bigotry and exclusion. I think that's when people get ostracized.
I do believe that people that strongly adhere to the traditional cultural values of America feel like their world is under assault from progressives. I do believe that, whether that's true or not, that people believe that.
I believe that too. I mean, there's no question that people believe that.
Yeah.
But I wonder, like, what are the foundational values that you're saying these things mean so much to me that means that my way of life is under attack. Things that I don't think we disagree with what should be foundational to Christianity. I mean, you and I have talked a lot about that.
That's true, we do, yeah.
That there are some things in our political sphere in this country that have become the most important Christian issues that really, to me, shouldn't really be, a big concern. I mean, really what Jesus talked about was personal transformation, and that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about judging other people for not adhering to, a lot of times, things that are in the Old Testament, in fact. But anyway,
and we all know what you're alluding to. Let me read you some good things about this is data about people that are religious. As we already said, there is some data that shows they lead a longer life. There's a lot of social support for religious people. They tend to belong to communities, and they get a lot of social support. Religious people tend to treat their bodies with a little bit more respect, which means they tend to be a little bit healthier. But it's also important to realize that people who experience struggles with their religious beliefs experience greater anxiety and depression, particularly for subgroups like homosexuals or people that believe in the gay community who are targeted as, people who are to be judged negatively by the religion to which they belong.
So we saw this growing up. I mean, maybe this is not on your point, but I saw growing up over and over and over again, young people lying about their faith and people pretending to speak in tongues and to do all kinds of crazy things. And we see this also in people who are homosexual pretending to be straight and having horrible psychological results, and suicidality is really, really high in that kind of population. And there are a lot of other, the thing that I worry about the most with this is demanding. This is kind of what this is saying, like, our society is going to go down the toilet if you're not religious. It's just yet another pressure. It's not something that you're not calling upon people to find a path. You're saying, if you don't do this, you're going to hurt our society. And I think that more oppression leads to more deviance, more maladaptive behavior. And
Noah, is it Noah? No, I don't want to mispronounce the name. One of our viewers is saying, is it not about belonging? It is about belonging, absolutely. And in both, in a way that could be seen as positive and also a way that could be seen as negative. In my opinion, any religion that doesn't tell anybody that they can belong is probably not at least true to what I would believe someone like Jesus was up to. But one of the reasons religion is so successful, is because it speaks to one of our basic needs as human beings, which is the need to belong to something. It also tells us we don't have to worry about that scary thing that when we die, which is, it's our greatest fear and one of our greatest needs. That's one of the reasons religions have succeeded.
We've talked a lot about our instinct towards tribalism in a lot of different topics, and that certainly is the case with religion. When you belong to something, it helps you, form an identity. This is who I am, and you can lean on that, and that can be really helpful. And it can also have some dark side as well.
Well, unfortunately, that need to belong can be easily subverted into something dark by people who know how to control, the young or the disenfranchised, which we see all the time with radical religious groups performing acts of violence. But absolutely, it's about belonging. Here's some more statistical data about religions in society. As I said, a lot of the news is positive. There is. I talked about social support, better health habits. We talked about some of these things that do seem to indicate that that religion does have some benefits for people socially. So maybe he's right about that. He said, not for a cliche, yet I believe it was Marx who described it as an opium of the masses. Yes, that's right, the opium of the masses, religion. Now let's talk about some other things. So atheists and other secular people, in contrast to what Attorney General Barr has to say here, they tend to be much more likely to support things like women's rights, gender equality, whereas religious individuals are more likely to support government use of torture. These are just statistics. I think there's a danger involved when there's a group of people who absolutely believe that what they believe is unquestionably right. Now, I'm going to be very careful about trotting on people's beliefs here, but I do just think that in general that can be said. Within America, the states with the highest murder rates tend to be the highly religious, such as Louisiana and Alabama. But the states with the lowest murder rates tend to be among the least religious in the country, such as Vermont and Oregon. But that study does go on to cite that in determining Vermont and Oregon, there were other factors other than just how religious it is. So that's not an entirely accurate thing that can be based entirely on religion in terms of the negatives. And then in 1999, a BARDA study found that atheists and agnostics actually had a lower divorce rate than religious Americans. And there's another study done in Canada that found that conservative Christian women experienced higher rates of domestic violence than non-affiliated women. So kind of all over the place. There are some positives and negatives to my original topic. But let's talk about, guys, this is Common Ground. We're talking about whether or not religion is healthy or harmful to our overall social well-being.
Michael, don't shut up. Go ahead and type all you want.
Please.
We want to interact.
We want to hear your guys' opinions. If you disagree with us, we'd love to hear your thoughts. I don't know if we get anything much to disagree with yet, but let's talk about how religion has been subverted for dark purposes throughout history, because we have to look at that. There's a tremendous percentage of wars that have been fought because of religion. Religion is a wonderful tool to recruit young, impressionable people into your cause. Young, impressionable people tend to really be drawn to people who claim to have the answers. It's, they're looking for comfort. They're looking for a place to belong. They're looking for somebody to give their life meaning. And there are far too many scary people willing to fill that role. So we have to take a look at some of the negatives around religion as well. First of all, the National Institute of Health lists a bunch of studies that show that belief in supernatural retribution seems to enforce adherence to social norms, but creates some serious psychological problems while doing so. So it's a very interesting thing. One of the interesting things I learned is that what radical Islam does. John, absolutely. That's what radical Islam does.
I brought that up about climate last time too, is that if you believe in sort of this magic that happens, you kind of stop paying attention to the things that you can know
and assuming responsibility.
And assume responsibility, right? So that it's like all these magical things happen. No, it's like there's a lot of this that we can explain.
Well, it's interesting that in countries that are and in areas that are highly religious, there's quite a bit of data that suggests that causes an increase in GDP. The people are more productive. I think it seems to be they're more easily told what to do.
I would love if that was the whole reason behind all of the covert and subvertive efforts by so many in this country to have Christianity really running our politicians. Mm-hmm. I would love for it if that was the reason. Just because the GDP, it's going to help the GDP.
Let's get it up there.
But there are enormous forces in this country constantly putting pressure on people to be religious. And I watched a new documentary recently called The Family, which is pretty wild.
Yeah,
the things
I watched some of it.
Yeah, that are happening right now, and some of the things that happened just during the last election that had to do with ways into the government, ways into some of our information about our government that really came by way of Christian groups, and pretty interesting stuff.
So Clara is saying religion also provides guidelines that promise if you do A through Z, you are saved. Some people need to have a pathway. That's so true. I think that's a really important point, Clara. And by the way, hello. I love you. I hope we get to see you soon, Clara. One of the reasons we were just talking about this, one of the reasons that religions have been so successful is that they really handle, at least in the minds of the followers, a couple of things that are very uncertain for people. So first, your religions are taking care of that fear, being saved. That salvation is the guiding principle behind a lot of these monotheistic religions. And I always ask, well, from what do we need to be saved? Well, it appears to be the bad moods of the same person that's going to save us. So
but also, there's this idea, we could debate where this came from and the usefulness of it, but the idea that we're flawed, the original sin, mm-hmm. That, and then you have to be saved from that. But the thing that always, that's always so hard for me is this idea that you're going to be saved by an external force, that it is not your effort. And it's so fascinating that in our country there's this idea that the Protestant work ethic, and that you're supposed to, by your own efforts, create your own reality, except when it comes to my spiritual life, then I'm supposed to just give it over, and I'm saved. I don't have to do, it's not the same ethic. Yeah. That, me, personally, that's not the way that I see the world.
I don't either. And ladies and gentlemen, this is Common Ground. Welcome. I'm John. This is Eric. We're talking about religion. Is it healthy or harmful for society? This discussion is based on a quote from the Attorney General William Barr, who was speaking this week and said that a lot of the societal ills we now see on the rise, that is a result of secularism becoming more popular, and that people who choose not to be secular are under attack from the secularists. Is that true? In your opinion, your experiences? We want to hear from you, your thoughts, please chime in with your thoughts and your feelings about this.
Does anyone have an idea? How do anyone out there think that it's okay or not okay for the Attorney General to so vehemently push a religious view? Is that okay? Is that separation of church and state? Is it okay for him to espouse that position?
I'm going to defend the Attorney General in this instance by saying that he didn't say this in the context of any of his duties as a law enforcement officer for the United States government. He was speaking privately to a group of people at a college. However, it does give us a glimpse into what he thinks is okay to say on a public stage, and that could be an issue. So you said something, Eric, and I really want to get some opinions out there from the people out there watching. Hopefully you guys will chime in on this one. You said that we were born with original sin. This is a popular...
I didn't say that.
You alluded to it. You referred
It wasn't
to that.
that's not my original idea.
Well, Eric, it's those pesky ladies that did this to us. So that's going to bring me to my next topic, which is religion and women. So let's talk about how religions have systemically suppressed women throughout the ages. And you see, I want to set this up a little bit. And I'm going to talk more about this in my closing comments. But for those of you watching, I really want to hear your opinions about this. One of the reasons that I was interested in having this conversation was because in reading the comments from Attorney General William Barr, I understood what he was talking about. It's not entirely untrue to say that a turning away from our puritanical spiritual beliefs is leading to some types of issues socially. That may be true. However, not for everybody. And there are many, many groups of people for whom the absence of religion is going to actually improve their lot in life, especially Christian religion. And one of those groups of people it's got to be said that women are a group of people that have been consistently suppressed by religions. And that wasn't always true. Many societies were matriarchal, Egyptians, the Greeks.
But in this country, what we're talking about is white moneyed men who so you can, yes, women, you should talk about women. I'm glad you're going to, but in this country, that's the history. So let's just have that foundation that those are the Christians that benefited from the system that was set up, and all others were to some small degree, to a great degree, left out of the privilege.
And Noe says Western religions primarily. Yeah, I think that's true. I would argue, though, that there are plenty of people in the African American community who, or in the Latino community, who feel very much blessed by their religion.
Oh, absolutely,
and are glad that they to be exposed to it.
No question.
So I absolutely believe that there are many people within all those communities who would believe that their religion has brought good things into their lives. And that's the topic tonight, guys. If you're watching, this is Common Ground. We're talking about religion. Is it healthy or harmful for our society? So what were we going to say?
So two things. Somebody can absolutely be grateful for something and get a great deal out of something. And it, at the same time, there's a certain amount of oppression that's involved with that. I mean, people oftentimes, I mean, even sometimes internalize some terrible things about themselves based on something that they feel like they're getting. So, I mean, yes, of course, people have. There's tons of religious people who are a variety from a variety of ethnic groups and genders and orientations. All the people, that you might want to talk about, all groups you want to talk about, there are lots of people in all those groups that are getting a great deal out of their participation in their religion. That's not to say that they haven't also, in addition to that, been oppressed in some way by those same religions.
Okay.
Both things can be true at the same time.
All right. We're just presenting both sides of that argument. Guys, we want to hear from you. Once again, the question, does religion hurt or harm our society overall? We're talking about some remarks from our Attorney General, was Mr. William Barr, who spoke this week, suggesting that a lot of the societal ills that we see are the result of secularism. So we're talking about religion, how it impacts our society, whether it's healthy or unhealthy. And right now, I want to get on this topic, and I'd love to hear from some of our lady viewers out there about women having been suppressed by religions. So throughout history, there were some very prominent matriarchal societies. That was done away with, and it is very clear that monotheistic religions like Judaism and Christianity spearheaded this movement of sort of guiding women through the I want to call it like a pretense, but I mean that's not the right word. Through the avenue of religion, sort of turning women into property for men, and that's something that happened. So Pete said it's only oppression if people are forced to observe it. Religion should be a freedom of choice issue. Yeah, that's we agree, Pete. Absolutely, religion should always be a freedom of choice issue. We're talking about this as it pertains to the comments from the Attorney General this week that a lot of the problems that we have in our society are a result of a lack of religion and a rise of secularism, and then on top of that, also the idea that that those who choose to be religious are being attacked now by secularists. And then we've gotten on to the positives and negatives of religion in our society. We're talking about how women have traditionally been very oppressed by the largest religions in the world. Elizabeth Cady Stanton wrote a 2-volume book called The Woman's Bible back in the late 1800s, 1885. She said this. She said, "You may go over the world and you will find that every form of religion which is breathed upon this earth has degraded women. The church is a terrible engine of oppression, especially as concerns women," she wrote to Susan B. Anthony in 1852. And then she said, "The Bible teaches that women brought sin and death into the world, that women precipitated the fall of the race, and that she was arraigned before the judgment seat of heaven, tried, condemned, and sentenced. Marriage for her was to be a condition of bondage, maternity a period of suffering and anguish, and in silence and subjection, she was to play the role of a dependent on man's bounty for all of her material wants and for all the information she might desire on the vital questions of the hour. She was commanded to make her husband, she was commanded to ask her husband at home." So that is all very true. Mm-hmm. It is all sourced from monotheistic religions. So, and yet, women tend to be more religious than men in the United States of America. Interestingly enough.
Well, I mean, there's so many ways, and I think that it's interesting when people, we all want to move forward, and we sort of want to forget about the ills of the past, but things don't go away. I mean, generationally, things hang on. That stuff isn't gone from our culture.
No, it's in the collective. It's mythology of our world,
and culture. There's so many small details of that still exist in all kinds of ways, even for progressive people. Even in the slightest, I hear things sometimes, and the misogyny is like totally unconscious, and and it comes from a lot of it comes from that right there. Yeah. And I'm not sure exactly what Pete's point was, but there's a whole lot of oppression that happens due to religion, that as a result of religious people and their beliefs that have nothing to do with whether or not you're signing up for it. And the cultural pressures to it should be an issue of freedom. It should be, you should be free to choose, but the cultural pressures are tremendous, and they're tremendous still today, which are back. However far you go back in our country, they were greater than they are now.
Yeah.
The cultural pressure to participate, and the familiar pressure to participate, and the incredible things, the psychological damage that all kinds of people go through because they're doing things that they know is not okay for them, but because the cultural, familial, societal pressures, they sign up for it. And it's
not to mention it just practically speaking, isn't that kind of silly? Isn't it kind of silly to what's the difference between, if you're going to absolutely adhere to the belief that there was this place of perfect paradise, and then this woman got talked into doing something naughty by a snake, and then talked the guy into it, and because of that we're cursed throughout the annals of time. You might as well believe that Zeus is still up on some mountaintop throwing lightning bolts around. I mean, isn't that true?
If you're asking me if I think it's silly, I think it's silly. But that, if somebody believes in that, what do you like? I mean, I don't know where to go from there. It's like that's their belief. Yeah. I mean, I did a lot of reading about a lot of religion and a lot of mythology, a lot of philosophy, and spent a great deal of my life reading things. I don't believe those things I don't believe that those things, even in the context of the most learned people in those religions, I do not believe that is meant to be taken literally.
Of course, I would agree with you.
And so so, but what are you going to do if somebody believes it literally? I mean,
if it's allegorical to something or figurative, what was the purpose? What is the purpose of that? If not to say women must subjugate them, must prostrate themselves in front of the man. We've been given divine providence over all that is female because of what other reason we have to have that part of the.
One of the things that I found that's really interesting is when you read the texts on your own, it's so different. Like if you really pay attention, there's a cultural interpretation that sometimes we're not aware of. That we have an idea about a story from the Bible and its meaning based on a cultural interpretation, rather than like if you really allow yourself to read the words, all kinds of possibilities are there. But you and I both went to church when we were growing up.
Oh yeah.
There's all kinds of stuff that like I had to unpack and unlearn in order to, and then also, I mean, this is getting a little far afield with religion, but like one of the things in this country, the King James Bible is one of the biggest piece of crafts that you could possibly find. It's based on terrible source material, super biased translations based on a political time. And I mean, it's just a terrible Bible. And it's the Bible that most Americans say is the only one you're allowed to read. And it's just awful. If you get good source material and read it with an open mind, there are all kinds of possibilities that most people don't, that don't interpret it that way.
So PETA said there's an implied judgmentalism by secularists about what values were in past times and what were actually the position of women in context. The most venerated person in the Catholic Church is the Virgin Mary. There are many types of styles of writing in the Bible that were meant to teach lessons of good and evil. That's true. You know what, though? I would say this in defense of women, Pete. Notice that the most venerated person in the Catholic Church is, even you have listed, that her sexual purity is important. The Virgin Mary. That's important within the context of these things. We don't talk about the Virgin King David, or we don't talk about the Virgin Noah, but the sexual purity of the woman is something that sort of grants her a veneration within. Even that's a type of suppression, I think, of women.
There are many books written on just that single topic.
Well, it's true, because we live in a world where there are actually women who are their genitals are mutilated because of this reason. This doesn't happen in the Catholic Church. It doesn't happen in Christian society, but there are religions that require that. This is part of that suppression of women. By the same token, there are many theologians, and I invite you guys to go and check it out. There are many learned theologians who believe absolutely that Mary Magdalene was not a prostitute, was actually either Jesus's wife or his most trusted companion. And by the way,
there's all kinds of really, really high quality source material that suggests that there were women that were part of the immediate group of Jesus. And there's a whole bunch of reading that could be done on that topic.
Yes.
And I also want to say, is the Virgin Mary concept. If women were so elevated in the Catholic Church, they would be able to be on the same level as priests, and they're not. And they're still a hierarchy, and women are not at the top of it.
That's right. And I'm struggling to. So Rabbi Devine wrote, Jesus' inclusion of women in his itinerant Galilean discipleship is nothing short of remarkable. In Palestinian Judaism, observant Jewish men did not speak to women outside of their kinship circle in public, let alone permit them to travel with them in public in a mixed gender entourage. So it appears that Jesus was a champion of women's rights. He famously forgave the adulteress. That's one of the most famous stories in the Gospels. So the concept of the Virgin Mary refers to her being born without sin. Her being born without sin, not Jesus. I don't know what that means. Then why use the word virgin? I mean, most people believe that that's physically, that she was actually a virgin. Yeah.
So this is an interpretation, as we were talking about, that my personal belief is that many of the things that people point to and as something that is literal is not literal but figurative or allegorical, and this is one of those things. And I don't know if I don't know if you're saying that this is meant that Virgin Mary really means that it's figurative. It means that being born without sin, not literally a virgin. So I mean, if that's what you're saying, yeah, she didn't give birth to somebody and without.
Well, the Bible tells stories and mentions the brothers of Jesus. So yeah, it's assumed that at some point she had a family.
Yeah.
But I go back to my statement that there is no male figure in the Bible that has the term virgin attached to his name. Sexual purity of women is an important thing. Yeah. That's a form of that is a double standard that exists for women, and it's religious at its basis.
And there are many things that were additions to the original source material, and my guess is that this was I never really looked at this particular thing, but I bet you that virgin idea came 1,000 years after the time of Jesus.
It is most prominently mentioned in the book of Luke. So there's very little mention of Mary in there's one of the Gospels that there's very little mention of her, and I forget which one it is. But she's most prominently mentioned in the book of Luke. I went to Catholic school until the 7th grade, and I was taught that about the Ascension. That is a sacrament in the Catholic Church, that the Virgin Mary did not die, but instead physically ascended to heaven. Now, this is an old idea that was still being taught to children in the 80s. Now, my question is, where did she go?
To heaven.
Where is it, out there somewhere? I mean, so these are the ideas that I think need to be reexamined. They become a little bit,
I won't speak for you. Again, I believe this is figurative. That holding certain values and behaving in a certain way, you ascend to the kingdom of heaven.
I disagree with you on that. I think that was considered a literal truth at a time when people believed that heaven was in a cloud somewhere.
No. I'm saying all these things. There are the majority of believers believe that they are literal. What I'm saying is that, and it's easier. I remember reading some of the Bible in some different translations that hadn't been so bastardized by medieval interpretation and political pressures to interpret things a certain way, and there is so much more of a flavor of transformation to so many of the things that people, it is what Jesus was talking about. Really, he was talking about personal transformation and political protest as part of that, a part of justice.
Nonviolent political protest. And it's really important for us to acknowledge, and by the way, if some of you have just joined us, guys, welcome to Common Ground. We're discussing religion. Religion, is it healthy or harmful to society? And we want to hear from you guys. Please chime in. The revolutionary thing about Jesus, the reason Jesus is such an important individual to me, it's got nothing to do with what happened after they punished him for speaking up. Not for me. I understand that's a very important thing for a lot of people. I'm really not that interested in it. To me, what's interesting about Jesus is he is the first individual throughout human history to come forward and say, love is what is important. Love and how we treat one another is what makes us worthy of the kingdom of God.
And started a long line of making sure that anytime somebody says that, somebody insists that you love other people and that you sacrifice for others, we're going to make sure to kill them as quickly as possible.
I think I missed that part, but it's true in the Bible. Before the Bible, there was Eastern religion, which was very philosophical, very intellectual, very allegorical to nature. There were the more violent, Judaism is a very warlike culture, and pre-Christianity. Jesus is the guy that said, "Oh no, it's love." And that's what's so revolutionary about him. That's why we need to pay attention to it and listen to him. Pete said, okay, Anna Maria said, men are allowed to live an eye for an eye, tooth for tooth. Women are supposed to turn the other cheek in a world that is based upon eye for an eye. Where does that put women? Also, look into the goddess Tonantzin and the Virgin of Guadalupe in Mexico. Very different, as Mexico is a matriarchal society. Anna, we were discussing that earlier about many of the earlier societies were matriarchal. It's very easily traced that, there were female gods in the older religions, and it was monotheism that sort of stepped on that. Pete is saying that the doctrine of perpetual virginity is distinct from the dogma of the Immaculate Conception of Mary, which relates to the conception of the Virgin Mary herself without any stain of original sin. This means that Mary conceived by the Holy Spirit without participation of any man. I see. Thank you, Pete, for clarifying that. But once again, I want to draw attention to the fact that when we talk about original sin,
artificial insemination,
the original sin is this thing that we're all born with. Why? Women. Original sin stems from women. It's another thing that religion has placed upon women as sort of a cross they must bear.
You've got a lot of splaining to do.
Yeah. John Preto, I was taught that by Philippine Catholic nuns that having dirty fingernails was cause for a ruler cracking in my knuckles. Me too, John, and that's still true. Eye for an eye keeps you stuck in the laws of cause and effect. Jesus said, turn the other cheek. Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about...
And another person we killed for saying that we should love one another, Gandhi, he said an eye for an eye just leaves the whole world blind.
Yes, that's true. So as you can tell, Eric and I both pretty strongly believe that we'd like to see a religion that does not cause women to accept a role as lesser than. That would be important to both of us, I believe. Am I correct in saying that, Eric?
Very much.
Let's talk about my...
You got a pet peeve?
Dude, we're going to talk now about, of all the pathetic, ridiculous bigotries in human history, we're going to talk about the one that's the stupidest, hardest to explain, and most inconceivably baffling to me, which is the bigotry against homosexuals, homophobia. Why anybody cares what two consenting adults do in the privacy of their home, why that's anybody's business, what that has to do with anything in anybody else's lives.
Or not in the privacy of their own home.
I thank you. I told my children, if you were gay, I'd be about as concerned with that as what color shoes you were wearing. I just don't understand. But let's talk about it. Let's talk about religious oppression of the gay community. And I don't want to sound, guys, look at.
Yeah, the only thing that you need to worry about is the religious oppression.
Yeah.
I mean, the rest of it's just normal, you know?
Well, Pete said first murderer was a man, Cain. If you want to be a literalist, are all men killers? Well, Pete, no, you're kind of making my point for me. The first deceit of woman caused a stain to be put on every woman afterward. God seems to have forgiven Cain, or forgiven men for Cain. He seemed to have gone a lot easier on women than on men. So once again, that's that sort of anti-feminine thread that runs through these religions. It's clearly there to be seen. Let's talk about this, though, religion and the gay community. And I'm going to go back to some very positive things about religion. Ladies and gentlemen, we are not here to simply bash on religion. We're discussing whether or not religion is healthy for society and covering it on a point-by-point basis. I was raised Catholic myself, learned a bunch of wonderful things in the Catholic Church. So, but most religious denominations have taken proscriptive action against sexual minorities, condemning same-sex behavior as sinful and barring LGBs from spiritual leadership positions, or requiring their celibacy in such positions. The three largest American religious denominations, the Roman Catholic Church, the Southern Baptist Convention, and the United Methodist Church, which represent approximately 35% of Americans' religious affiliations, currently endorse these positions. So there's absolutely a thread of anti-homosexuality within the church. I have read the Old Testament passages. I still don't really understand how that's delineated in the Bible. I have read how it was interpreted by Sharia law from what's in the Quran. That's an easier thing to get. I think that, and of course, currently, guys, just so you know, the only cultures that kill people for being homosexuals, where homosexuality is an offense punishable by death, are in cultures that have Sharia law.
Although, I want to say, people in this country are bullied, beaten, and killed.
Oh, that's true.
In this country for being homosexual every day. So it may not be on our books, but it is, religious oppression does have some part in that, and it's still, and then that doesn't also address suicidality. People kill themselves also because of psychological damage done by familial and societal pressure to not be who they are, or because of trauma that they've gone through at the hands of others. And yes, maybe it's not on our books to kill people because they're gay, but a lot of people end up dead because they're gay in this country.
There's a story in the news this week. I'm not going to go into it in great detail. You can look it up. The parents of Matthew Shepard had some pretty strong words for a couple of members of our government for inviting them to an event where they talked about the oppression of religious beliefs that led to their son being murdered. Their son was tied to a fence and lit on fire and burned to death because he was a homosexual in this country. So definitely it's there. It's, as I said, it's a bigotry that just, I mean, all bigotry is I would consider to be an evil. I would consider all bigotry to be something that we need to change. But this one, I just don't even get it.
One of the things, going back to what you were talking about with the Bible, one of the things that, so there's quite a few mentions in Leviticus about homosexuality, but so is, we couldn't play football in this country because you can't touch the skin of a pig. You can't
shave your beard.
You can't shave your beard. This heathen over here. There's a whole bunch of really ridiculous things that are in Leviticus
that we don't do anymore,
that we don't pay any attention to.
Let me tell you something else in Leviticus. The specifically appropriate way that you are to butcher an ox so that the smoke rising to heaven is pleasing to God. That's in Leviticus. We don't butcher oxen anymore to please God. Why do we still oppress and judge an entire sector of our society who are just normal people trying to have a life? Why do we still do that? Why?
I don't know. And here's my, the way that I judge things in the Bible. It's not infallible. I'm not the Pope, but if Jesus,
you're gonna get me in trouble now. I laughed at that.
If Jesus didn't say it, whatever Jesus says, I mean, according to Christianity, I couldn't agree with you. If Jesus didn't say it, and there's. He didn't write any of the books, but if Jesus didn't say it, what Jesus said overrides everything else in the Bible. There's
I have given you a new covenant.
I was just going to say that. And so anything else that isn't backed up by Jesus is, to me, is open to your interpretation. And if you are choosing to be bigoted against gay people, that's your choice, in my opinion. Jesus doesn't talk about it.
No, he does not. In fact, in my opinion, there's a lot of evidence in the Bible that Jesus would have absolutely been cool with someone being gay.
A lot of the other things that you could put, if you could put characteristics together, it would make a lot of sense.
It would.
He's for the downtrodden. He's for the disenfranchised. That's what he's up to. He's saying, let's pull the meek together, and let's let's create something.
Well, let me play devil's advocate here.
All right.
So Jesus famously forgave the adulteress, the woman who committed adultery, but he didn't say, "It's cool, dude. Go do adultery, man. It's cool." He said, "Go and sin no more."
Yeah.
So he wanted her not to do that anymore. Now, adultery is in the Ten Commandments. It's clearly a sin. I don't find that much. I'm telling you, I read Leviticus. You could interpret that to mean it's an abomination, So, but Jesus didn't go up to some guy who shaved his beard and said, "You try that again, and I'm not going to be so cool next time." So, I remain unconvinced that even in the context of biblical scholarship, this is a bona fide sin any more than not butchering the ox the right way is. I remain convinced of that.
I'm with you.
Clara said in Utah, Mormon Church's doctrine of not having gays in their church caused tremendous amount of teen suicides. It's an absolute demonstrable fact that there's a tremendous amount of depression, self-loathing, and suicide among gay young people. And some of that, not all of it, but some of it, a good deal of it comes from religious upbringing. Pete said, in my opinion, the principles of the church, the concepts of love God and love your neighbor as yourself, the practice of the church can be changed over time. Pete, that's common ground, baby. That's exactly how I feel. I feel like everything else, that's, by the way, that's Jesus' new covenant when he said, I give you a new covenant. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul and all your mind, and love your neighbors, you love yourself. That's the new covenant, and anything else should be interpreted. I absolutely believe that that's correct. Pete, you and me, common ground, dude. Clara said, I'm living in Utah, and everything here, social and political, is built around LDS Church. My neighborhood is 87% Mormon. The impact on this culture is very incredible. Clara, this is the heart of our question today. So I don't want to put you on too tough a spot, but you are an intelligent, articulate woman. I trust that you'll be able to do this to whatever level you are comfortable. And if you don't want to do it, it's fine. But I'd like to ask you our big question tonight. Do you see that influence of religion in that community as a positive thing, a negative thing, or is there a mixture of both, which is probably the truth? I'd love to ask you, have you answer that question. By the way, every legitimate researcher who talks about this question that we're talking about tonight says that it's just an absolute mixture. It's far too complex to say religion is unhealthy or religion is healthy. We talked about this at the beginning. Pete, you weren't here yet. Some of you guys weren't here yet, but in the beginning, we spent some time on how people that belong to religions tend to statistically live a little bit longer. They have wonderful social support. They handle stress differently because they believe that they have a different type of support for those stressors. So there are some absolute positives to being religious.
I think for the most part, it's really positive for the individuals that are practicing, you know.
Well,
but it's also a matter of what foundational values are they putting into practice, and then is that good for other people? You know, sometimes it's not.
What Pete said, in his opinion, the principle of the church, the concepts of love God and love your neighbors yourself. If that's all anybody did in religions, yeah, I would be one. I'd belong to a religion.
Me too. I couldn't find myself because in practice, you know, when I wanted desperately at one point to be a active member in the Catholic Church. I couldn't do it. There's just too much ill that's going on, and it's not that.
I think the Catholics have had some wonderful leadership in the popes recently in terms of taking them in a.
I agree, and some of my favorite people in history were Catholics who were deeply dedicated. Thomas Merton is one of my favorite people ever to live on the planet.
We both love Thomas Merton.
And I'm deeply moved. I have known a few people who have been deeply religious and lived more according to what Pete's talking about, really about love, and I respect them so much, and I envy them because they spend so much time wrestling with the parts that are unhealthy and find a way to, despite that, to love anyway and to love in a big way, and I admire that, and I want that for all of us.
And you know. Just to wrap up, because we're at an hour, and I know you got to get going. Just to wrap up, once again, Thomas Merton, a Catholic Trappist monk. But let me tell you why Thomas Merton is a Trappist monk. Was a Trappist monk. He's a great writer, wonderful, wonderful Christian man. Check him out. Thomas Merton wrote a bunch of wonderful books. But he couldn't be join the Jesuit order, which is what he wanted to do, because of his past. So all the wonderful things all the wonderful things that man did in his life, he could have done under the umbrella of the Jesuits, but they wouldn't let him bring that out because of their judgments of him. This is where religion does the wonderful and the stupid. You know what I mean?
And the Jesuits did have and still do have way more juice. You know, they're marketed way better. Nobody knows the Trappists.
Yeah.
I mean, There was a beer that I used to like that's Trappist Monks.
Clara said, I can say it's uncomfortable and not a very progressive to live here, but I think the key as always is tolerance and respecting each other's beliefs. Well said, Clara. My 2 daughters are Mormon. I taught them how to make spiritual choices. Interesting. I used to work among a lot of people that were LDS. Wonderful. They're a wonderful community. They are community-oriented people.
I totally agree. There's so many things that I think that aren't good about the way that Mormon belief expresses itself in the world. However, almost every single Mormon person I've ever known has been a delightful human being who works hard and who happy and tries their best to be a light in the world.
Yes, that's right.
And so
that's true.
This is a perfect example of what we're talking about. There's this incredible dichotomy with religion. There's so many good things. There's so much good that comes of it, and there's a lot of ill that comes out of it. And I'm gonna go.
Well, but don't leave yet, because Pete just asked a really good question. Let me ask, what are the societal values being put forward by secularism, rationalism, and relativism? It's a great question.
That's a whole show. Could we talk about
it? It is a whole show.
Could we maybe talk about that in relationship? Maybe that's a good topic in relation to PC culture. Those are some of the same. I mean,
So I feel like, I am not a secularist. I'm not.
I would like to know what. Sometimes when I hear people say that, they have a very particular idea of what that means, and they mean it as a derogatory term. I would like to know what.
I don't think Pete means it that way.
But I don't know. It's just a word. At this point, I don't have any idea what the definition is.
I want to briefly answer that question, because we are out of time, by quoting Ricky Gervais from his film Afterlife. His show is on Netflix, and he plays an atheist on the show. And there's a very religious woman who says, what's going to stop you from raping and killing as many people as you want? And he said, nothing. I do. I rape and kill exactly as many people as I want. Yeah. And the idea being, among rationalists and secularists, I believe, Pete, if I'm, like I said, I don't want to speak out of turn here, but I believe the idea is that there is a societal normative distinction of decent behavior that we can agree on that does not require a divine stamp on it. Now, specifically what those things are, you'd have to go and ask some people who belong to those movements. I don't think that we are representative of those movements.
Well, one of the things that I mean, freedom is one thing, and this is a very, very big topic.
Yeah,
and
sure
is. This is an enormous topic that I would like to talk about, at least in part, in another.
Maybe we should do next week. We should do like chapter 2 of this, and we'll talk about this. We'll come more prepared for that. But I'm gonna tell you guys what I think the answer to these challenges are right now in my final words.
Okay.
And I know you got to.
Thanks, everyone.
In my final words, I'm going to share my views on this with you guys. So thank you for giving me your ear on this. I consider this to be. I hope you guys know. So I want you to know that I work very hard on this part of the show each week. I spend a lot of time writing this because I want to speak in a way that serves the people watching the show and isn't just bloviating about my opinion. So here's the way I see it. When I was raised Catholic, and I went to Catholic school up and through the 7th grade. Now, at that point, I already knew that religion, at least the Catholic religion as I grew up in it, wasn't going to be for me. Far be it for me to insult anyone's beliefs or their religion. I just knew that I personally couldn't function and grow spiritually within that structure. But there's something that I used to say a lot right after I left Catholic school, and I think it's relevant to this discussion. I used to say, and I don't suggest that all the Catholics out there had the same experience as me, but I used to say that in Catholic school, I learned all the right things for all the wrong reasons. It's true for me. I learned about charity. I learned to say the rosary, which is a powerful form of meditation. I learned the principles of forgiveness, sacrifice. I learned the psychological benefits of confession to alleviate personal guilt. I learned the power of making personal amends to those I'd wronged. But I learned it all through the lens of fear. Each principle was taught to me not as a way to be truly loving and responsible to those around me, but more as a way to avoid punishment from a vengeful, all-powerful entity who was not cool with my failures and who never took his eyes off of me. It was a frightening way to live, especially as a child. And as I got older, frankly, I thought it all a little bit silly, a little ridiculous. Now I've come to a place where, for me, a patriarchal father figure of a God is unnecessary. Here's an analogy. When my children were little, they were frightened and in awe of what they saw as my omnipotence. They thought I could run really fast. They thought I was super strong. My size, my strength, my knowledge of a world that was new and fascinating and scary to them, it made me seem omniscient to them. But as they matured and learned of their own strengths and experienced their own being, they learned that I was less magical and far more relatable and loving than their young minds had at first imagined. The same goes for God in my thinking. As we develop our own spiritual natures, we learn that we can venture out into this scary place, and that using our own gifts and talents, we can grow in wisdom and strength and learn to manage the life we've been given. And then God becomes something far greater and mysterious than a homicidal judge of human behavior. Yet in saying that, I fully acknowledge that I have also seen firsthand the damage that can occur for a person at the spiritual level when they truly believe in nothing. I told you, Pete, I'm not a secularist. I'm not an atheist. I'm not a secularist. I spent my 20s addicted to hardcore drugs. At least part of that experience was due to the fact that I was spiritually empty. So dangerous as God can be, the lack of God can be equally, if not more so, detrimental to our health and our sanity. This is a very complex issue, obviously. And the last thing I would ever do is tell someone what they should believe. But what I can do here is tell you what I believe is possible. I believe that thus far, mankind has done a poor job of perceiving the truth of the divine. Think of it like stargazing centuries ago. For all these centuries, humanity had to use nothing but our eyes to decipher the heavens. Then we invented the telescope, and we started to see things as they truly are. What about the medical sciences? Our understanding of how our bodies function physically, it's grown by leaps and bounds because we support new ideas in the science of health. In the same way, we've improved our understanding of the sciences in every field, from astronomy to physical health, as we've used innovation to deepen our view and understand far more comprehensively how these physical and celestial bodies work. So must we continue to strive to better our understanding and our relation to whomever or whatever created this reality in which we live and us. We've always wondered about the origins and our connections to the divine. We are so desperate to know who or what made us and what its purpose for us may be, that it's the one constant in every society and civilization known to us. We've all asked, why are we here and what's up there? Is it so crazy to imagine that we, in our spiritual adolescence, have thus far only glimpsed the surface of what is true and what's possible? Is it blasphemous or exciting to believe that we may stand on the brink of the possibility of understanding God in a new, deeper way, a way that doesn't require that we fear hell or rebuke our neighbors for their lifestyles or their gender? That we grasp our importance in a way that doesn't require the subjugation of others? One thing I know for sure, we are hardwired to be at our best and happiness when we are loving and serving one another. Gee, I kind of sound like that guy Jesus, don't I? Maybe we should have listened better the first time around. In the interest of love, service, and responsibility, I think we have to take the most difficult road forward. Continuing to cling to beliefs devised by frightened cavemen 2,000 years ago, when they clearly no longer serve the whole of our culture and our collective society, is both irresponsible and destructive. And believing in nothing, once again, just my opinion, but that just seems to me not only dangerous, but just a little bit cowardly. No, the most courageous and therefore the hardest road forward for us is to admit that we know almost nothing, and yet that there is something there worth knowing, and commit to a new understanding of the divine. It's easier said than done, but what are the alternatives? That's a subject for another show. But I will leave you with this bit of wisdom. It was either a quote from Andre Gide or Morgan Dexter, depending on who you ask. But who said it is not as important as what it can teach us about this topic. And the quote goes as follows: "Trust those who seek the truth. Doubt those who claim to have found it." Thank you guys so much for being here with us on Common Ground. Again, we'll be back next week at our regular time. But I really appreciate you taking your time to spend this with us this evening and sharing the conversation. Like and follow our page. Share this and get other people on next week. We want this to grow. Thank you all so much for being here. Have a wonderful evening.